Welcome back to Season 5 of Porcelain Peak, Strange and Scary Podcast, featuring Chop Talk, trivia, and deep dive main discussions into the odd and unusual. I'm one of your hosts, Tone, and I'm joined by...
John.
And...
Internet Daddy Anthony.
Yeah.
Muad'Dib!
Oh, okay, Papa. Okay, Papa. Anyway, this week we are doing our... I guess we'll call it the final countdown. It's the final sci-fi redemption. Well, I meant like for the show. But
Yeah.
That's true too. We are doing our final...
A lot of final things happening.
Sci-fi redemption. If you aren't familiar with that, we picked movies that we hadn't seen that we're kind of ashamed of, our shameful misses, and then we watch them and talk about them. So for that, this week we're going to be talking about Dune and Primer. I think that was Dune was you and Primer was you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, right on. Cool. So that's what we're doing, and we're going to play trivia and Chop Talk and all the good stuff. So if that sounds good, then stay tuned.
Why don't you take an axe and chop it open?
Before we dive into the news, because there is a time and place for everything, how are you guys?
I don't know if I like that or not.
You trying to police the way we podcast, bro?
No.
So I'm pretty good. I watched a bunch of movies today. I also cooked dinner
Nice.
and filled my belly before I came over here. I was having some issues getting the water to boil, and then I threatened it with a poison tip dagger, and it finally acquiesced.
Did you have leftovers?
Yeah, there's some leftovers.
Can you bring me any?
I just didn't ask.
Nice invite,
Fair
bro.
enough, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, how was it? How was the food?
It was good. It's
How was the movie-going experience?
Describe it to us in gross detail.
the food.
Just kidding. You already did that to me before we recorded.
Yeah. No, movie going experience was great. We'll talk about those things here in a little bit. But also got to add for our alphabet roulette. We added Tremors to that list, and Tremors is just a blast, an ass blast, if you will.
That's Tremors too.
Oh, well, yeah.
Electric Boogaloo.
Poogle. How are you?
Well, Anthony, I can tell you my balls have never been sweatier than they have been this week.
I'm so sorry.
Because it is hot as hell here in California, in Central Valley, California. But other than that, doing quite well. Also watching a lot of great movies.
Speaking of sweaty balls, what does it mean to you guys when someone says swamp ass? Because I heard something different than what I normally think of it as. And so I wanted to...
And that's scary because these are things we need to know. we need to have in text defined Webster style.
I thought you were always saying swam pass. I was like, I don't understand what you mean by that.
I got swam pass. Because I'm always in the pool, baby.
No, for
I think
me,
I just saw Michael Phelps because I got swam pass.
For me, swamp ass is like.
To me, it's when a little bit of your butt juice and a little bit of your sweat juice mixes together.
It's like grundle to tip of the ass crack is just a mess.
It's just sweaty.
Yeah, just not poop, but sweat.
Yeah, okay.
when you got a snail
that's what I
trail
thought.
from poo hole to goo hole.
The long way around.
Up my head? That's crazy.
Everybody watching and listening is just like, you should have ended the show last week. Should have called it
That's
quits
what
then.
I thought. But today I heard differently.
Ended the show last week.
That it was like a poo explosion.
No, that's
Like if a baby has the poo explosion, you know how babies do that?
no. That's a blowout.
Yeah. I call it a crap attack, but...
Do you know that in Mexico during the shooting of David Lynch's Dune, everybody came down with a little something called Montezuma's Revenge?
Because they drank the water?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is just another name for traveler's diarrhea.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just everyone was just shitting their brains out.
Oh.
So yeah, now that we've had that lovely discussion,
Saw a trailer randomly for Willy Wonka, or just Wonka today.
so I was going to ask you about that actually
Wonka.
because we're talking about Dune. So Timothy Chalamet.
Love it.
Eventually.
Love him in Dune. From the trailer, I was like, you just don't have that, like, charm.
That je ne ne ne.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Wilder is going to be the best, but I don't think Depp's performance was awful. I mean, at least he still brought something to it, but Chalamet is kind of like just flat.
So, I thought it looked terrible from the trailer. The only thing that made me go, okay, maybe this will actually be fucking awesome, is that it's from the director of Paddington.
Right.
And I think the two Paddington movies are great for, being super cute kids movies, but this is obviously trying to be some sort of prequel to the Gene Wilder version. He's sang the same lines, from the Gene Wilder thing, the Oompa Loompa, the weird ass fucking Oompa Loompa at the end. is modeled after those Oompa Loompas. But I felt like Chalamet was doing a Johnny Depp Wonka. He's got the weird like, yeah, I'm gonna go do this and find I'm a chocolatier and blah blah blah, and like this weird creepy thing that Depp was doing, and I was like, what is this movie even trying to be? I don't really understand why we're supposed to be interested.
I'm not.
I've yet to have been convinced by anything that there's a reason that this should exist. There's no need for a prequel.
It's because it's a recognizable property.
I understand this,
And
but
it can sell candy bars.
yeah, fuck all that though, because the first one is practical effects, and Gene Wilder's performance is fantastic, and it's practically a perfect movie.
And also was made to sell candy bars. So they've been doing it for a long ass time.
Also, as far as the Oompa Loompa stuff goes, why not just cast I don't know what
little
the correct-
person.
yeah, a little person to do it. Like,
Yeah, why do you have to CG? Is it Hugh Grant?
yeah.
Hugh Grant's face onto it.
I mean, that was kind of funny because he's like, no, I'm already dancing. I was like, okay.
It kind of reminded me of the tiny Bradley Cooper from, I don't know if you saw it, but you saw it, right? Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
The tiny Bradley Cooper. But yeah, looks terrible. But Wonka, probably won't check it out. But let's talk about some news that we might care about a little bit more.
How did Insidious do?
So, Insidious is actually making the most money of any Insidious movie since the second one. So in about 10 years.
And it had like a 10 mil budget, right? It was pretty low.
Yeah, so it's doing quite well.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit about it in a minute after I lightning round through less interesting news.
Okay.
But I do want to start with some Jordan Peele news. So
Peele.
Jordan Peele this Halloween season is going to be curating and editing a book called Out There Screaming, an anthology of new black horror. So it's going to be all horror stories written by black authors about horror things, but also the horror of the black experience. And if Jordan Peele's involved, I'm interested. And also, I've actually been reading recently, so maybe this will be a book that I'll actually pick up and check out. So that will be coming out sometime around this Halloween.
Sign me up.
Speaking of signing up for things, we need to fucking sign up for this next thing. Claudio Simonetti's Goblin is hitting the road to play live the score from Demons, which is a great fucking movie if you haven't seen it. Total schlock fest. Across the country, coming to San Francisco in October, coming to Sacramento in October.
Wow.
We got to go see Goblin. We've made enough fucking jokes on this show about Goblin.
Goblin,
we can't
he's
pass
nuts.
up going to see Goblin. That's all I got to say. Deadpool 3, you guys seen any of the stuff coming out of this?
I've seen some of the stills. It's Hugh Jackman in the yellow Wolverine suit.
Oh shit.
This is a terrible quality image, but
It's funny, but it doesn't look as bad as I thought it would.
well, he also doesn't have the mask on. Once
Yeah.
the mask goes on, then we'll know for sure if that was always a bad idea or if it was just something that the studio was just dumbly not doing. But yeah, that was the biggest thing this week was he's in the costume. The second thing is they're apparently bringing in Jennifer Garner's Elektra
Whoa.
into this movie, and from some of the set stills, this is some sort of post-apocalyptic 20th Century Fox world. Like, that seems to be what the narrative is going to be like the world of 20th Century Fox Marvel properties is now in like a post-apocalypse, and there was a still of like Deadpool and Wolverine standing next to a like destroyed, crumbled 20th Century Fox like logo.
Oh my god.
I
Yeah,
mean, that
and-
sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it seems like they're trying to rope in like all the failed. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see maybe some. I know Hulk was Universal.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the Fantastic Four movies were 20th Century Fox, but either way,
I think those were Fox. I don't know now, but he is supposed to be in the same like X-Men universe as Wolverine and like the X-Men movies, right? Like,
Yeah.
but very loosely because I don't think any of them ever showed up outside of like he knocked on the door.
Yeah, there's the one scene where he knocks on the door, it opens, and it's got all the First Class era X-Men sitting in the room.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's just X-Men that we had never seen. We'd seen Colossus, but now it's played by a different actor. But yeah, he was supposed to be in that universe, but that universe also has no continuity or consistency to it. So I'm cool with whatever the fuck he decides to do with these remaining characters to try to wrap this up and then merge it into the MCU in some way.
That's gonna be weird. I can't picture him in that franchise.
Yeah, we'll see. Unless he's killing all the other characters. That would be dope. James Cameron was recently talking about how fucking busy he is and all the projects he has going on, and he let slip that they're moving forward with not one but 2 sequels to Alita: Battle Angel.
Oh shit!
I know they had,
Which was the original plan. We just hadn't heard of anything about it for a while.
I thought that movie tanked.
It's had a resurgence critically. Like with hindsight, people going back and watching it, like this actually was a pretty well put together film.
I found it narratively extremely boring, but visually it was fucking incredible, which makes sense if it's James Cameron involved. I think it was Robert Rodriguez, I believe.
Yep.
But yeah, so
Oh shit!
I'm interested in seeing sequels just because I think they're really stunning looking movies, and I was bummed having finally gotten around to watching this that I didn't go see it in theaters. But yeah, he was saying like I'll be bouncing back and forth to different countries working on Avatar sequels and Alita: Battle Angel sequels.
And he's directing them?
No, he's not.
Just producing them?
Yeah, he's just producing because he originally was supposed to direct Alita as well, but because he got so busy with Avatar and all of its sequels, it hasn't been confirmed if Rodriguez is going to be coming back for the Alita sequels, but potentially. Just thought that was interesting for anybody who's an Alita Battle Angel fan. And then the final piece of news that's really going to get John rock hard is just
I think I already know about it.
Just a minor little update about a franchise called 28 Days Later.
What?
So, Alex Garland has said recently that he has a story idea that he's working on that he's very excited about. And
Did he work on the other 2?
He was the writer for for 28 Days, and then he did some like script polishing for 28 Weeks, but was not the primary writer for that film.
Yeah, Killian said that he is 100% down to come back as long as Garland comes back and Boyle comes back. Boyle has also said that he will come back as long as the other 2 come back. So
I think Boyle specifically said that he would come back if Garland doesn't want to direct it himself.
Oh.
I would be very excited about Garland directing it. That would be toit. But they've all agreed that it will not be 28 months later. It will be 28 years later, which is pretty close to how long it will actually be by the time the movie comes out, because they were shooting the first one in 2000. So Killian was the one who was actually like saying that he had been talking to Danny and saying like, hey, if we do this, it needs to be 28 years later.
That's fucking scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what Garland was saying is like part of what got him so excited about this new idea he has, is that he like finally was able to, whatever it is, unlock like his idea for what he thinks the world would look like 28 years after what happened in those movies.
Yeah, apparently the reason why he was like so adamant about not coming back to that franchise and writing for that story anymore was because of the direction that 28 Weeks goes at the very end, which is that the infection makes it to the mainland. He felt like that kind of paints you into a corner where like the whole world has to be in shambles and that's your only real option.
You're just another dude making a zombie apocalypse movie.
Yeah. But he's apparently now like he threw out a story idea to Boyle like 2 years ago, and then has like slowly but surely been like, no, that story idea kind of slaps, and like they've just been going back and forth.
And this would be the prime time to strike while the Cillian Murphy iron is hot, because not only is he probably going to be getting a lot more attention from Oppenheimer, which has already been, early reviews are saying it's a masterpiece, and
It's gonna tank.
I mean, yeah, financially it's not going to do great, just like Tenet, but
I mean, it'll be an awards season.
Be an amazing movie, and
An award season for sure.
Yeah, and so he's going to be writing off of that, and then also he's been in that Peaky Blinders show for years, which I watched the first like 3 seasons and thought it was fantastic. I just fell off of it at some point, but they're also going to be making a Peaky Blinders movie. Oh. So I think Cillian Murphy is going to be making a late season comeback in his career. I've always loved pretty much everything I've seen him in. He is part of the reason why Scarecrow is my favorite Batman villain, and also just being a Halloween fool.
Him or you?
His take on Crane is just, it's so good.
Yeah, so I'm super excited for that to eventually happen, and I hope it happens soon.
Yeah.
And not to the point where we're getting 28 decades later.
Mm-hmm.
What was the Insidious stuff you were going to say?
Insidious.
Well, I wanted to take us over to a little new segment I like to call Internet Daddy's Digest, where I run you through. We don't have room
for new segments, buddy.
Yeah, okay. I'm doing it anyway. Internet Daddy's Digest. I want to talk to you guys about a couple movies that I saw. Insidious: The Red Door.
Oh, you went and saw it?
Seen it twice.
Wow. All right. And it's made $20 thanks to you.
$20. Yeah.
Why did you see it twice?
So, well, it's like I was telling you guys. First time I watched it was for me. Second time I watched it was for my commentary dudes. Because they have commentaries for all the other NCDI. And so I needed to finish the journey. But I will...
Insidibots.
Yeah, I will say that my expectations were very, very low, just because of the last couple Insidious movies I thought were fine to bad. But I was excited because it's Patrick Wilson directing, all the OG people coming back, and I had a really good time with it. I don't think that it is a great horror movie. The scares are pretty much just standard Insidious, like misdirect, crazy jump scare. It's nothing you haven't seen before in a million other James Wan. Somebody else is directing a James Wan property. Yeah. But I think the actual story of this family, I don't know how much of it was my nostalgia because I just am so attached to the Insidious movies, and we've talked about it recently.
Because you felt very similarly when 2 came out.
Yeah, like I love 2 a lot more than a lot of people do, and that's partially just because I like that it's a continuation of that same story and it ties into the first story, and this one kind of does a similar thing, not quite to that same extent, but does try to really tie into the things that happened in the first 2 movies, treats them as very important at the end of Insidious 2. Patrick Wilson and his son they got hypnotized to have their memories of the further and stuff erased.
They got Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, and in this movie, it's all about like they know something happened, in their past. Like Dalton knows he was in a coma, but now he's going off to college, and he's like, so the whole family's falling apart around this, and Rose Byrne knows what happened because she did not get hypnotized, but she can't say anything, and so it causes a lot of tension. And then Dalton goes off to college to art school, which I liked because he's got his little drawings that he did in the early ones, and it's kind of a parallel journey of him and Patrick Wilson both starting to unlock their like memories of what they went through in the further, and of course then those things start coming in to get them. And I thought that it was, if you're attached to that family and you like those first 2 Insidious movies, I think it's a pretty good conclusion to their story, and I got pretty emotional at a couple parts. But if you're going in to get spooked, I don't think it really delivers on that. And there's a couple good scares, but outside of it, it's nothing super original. So a lot of people have been negative on it, but I think that's just because they wanted something like new and exciting. It's like, no, it's the 5th Insidious movie. I'm just happy that they brought the original people back and wrapped it up. And on top of all that, Patrick Wilson is a pretty competent director, and I loved the way that the movie was shot and the way that it looked. It fits right in with the other Insidious movies, and so I'm really excited to see what he does going forward.
Cool. Good to know.
The Blackening. We talked about this last week. I checked it out right after we finished recording last week. So fucking fun.
So funny.
If you have not had a chance to check out The Blackening, it is available for rent right now. It is going to be, I'm sure, streaming in another week or so. It will be coming out on Blu-ray next month.
It's on my short list of things to watch while I'm on vacation. That and Beau is Afraid.
Very good comedy.
Yeah, again, that's
pretty basic horror movie.
Yeah, if you're going in for a spooky horror movie, you're not going to get that. But if you're going in for
very, very predictable.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, okay, that's the problem.
But I just had the biggest fucking smile on my face the whole time, and I was cackling at a lot of the jokes and a lot of the moments. I think it's all about the performances of these actors and these people, and the writing is really sharp. And the references to like a million other horror things and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and like all this different stuff. Like,
it's just a constant like...
Yeah, the whole movie, I was just like, I wanted to keep texting you guys, like, they reference this, they reference this, they reference this. So I had an absolute blast with it. Go check it out. It really bummed me out that movie got like a complete wet fart of a release in theaters, because I would have loved to have seen it with a crowd.
I think it would have killed in October.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe they'll get a repush.
That stuff always surprises me. It's like, yeah, that's a prime October movie.
So weird, too. It was directed by Tim Story, who... Immediately, I was like, that's the guy that did the Fantastic Four movies, the ones we were just talking about, the Chris Evans ones. Yeah. And but then I was looking at his filmography, and I was like, oh, but he also way before that did Barbershop and is a black man himself. So I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is probably more the comedy route is probably more his speed because that's where he started. And obviously, there's a lot of people who like Barbershop. I've never seen it. I'll have to check it out because
it's good.
Really
I like it too, yeah.
I really liked this movie, so it made me want to go back and check it out. And then I wanted to wrap up the Internet Daddy Digest by opening the floor up
Us nerds went to an early screening.
Early.
On a Monday of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Yeah.
In IMAX.
In IMAX.
Whew. Man, I was sweaty palms through a lot of this movie.
Yeah.
Perfect movie? No.
No.
Fantastic action movie? Yes.
Outside of the house lights being on for the first 10 minutes of the movie, that gave me the sweatiest palms.
I almost got up, but I was like, I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when people were getting up, I was like, I hope you're getting up to go tell somebody about this.
And they did.
Yeah, and then eventually
I hope there's other snobs out there like me.
Yeah, I can't be the only one.
Some guy caught me closing the door the other day. We went and watched Dial of Destiny. I was like, I'm closing this. So I hate when they leave that door open.
I do
and
it
then you can
too.
hear it. And I'm like, I don't want to hear people getting popcorn.
So it's not hearing that I care about as much. It's that there's always a light that casts off from the doorway through the hall onto the side of the screen, and there's always one corner where you can see everything behind the screen, and I'm like, I fucking can't handle this. Somebody close that fucking door.
I just do it.
But I totally agree. Not a perfect movie. I don't think that it quite reaches the high highs that Fallout does. I still think that Fallout is...
I think
Fallout and
Ghost
Ghost
is the
Protocol
best
are-
of the franchise.
Yeah, I don't know. Something about Fallout, I don't know if it's because to me that this in that the story and the action and everything melds together so well, but Protocol,
And there's a plot.
Yeah.
I think that on top of that Fallout, I think that the scene where Henry Cavill cocks his arm gun,
reloads his arm gun.
yeah, basically turned like hundreds of millions of 100% straight men into bisexual men.
Absolutely, I can say from experience.
But yeah, a blast. If you have a chance to see it, highly recommend it. Fantastic in theaters. I hope it makes a killing. It had a massive budget, so go see it.
There's also I wanted to mention this to you guys because I forgot to mention it after the movie. There's a really, really funny bit. To me, it was really funny where they're putting Tom Cruise's face, digitally on a bunch of people, and I was like, I'm 100% certain that is a commentary on the fact that there are a million Tom Cruise deepfakes online. Every time you go into Instagram Reels, or Cord or Crew did it, where they hired a Tom Cruise impersonator and then deepfaked Tom Cruise onto it.
Oh, wow.
He's one of the most popular people to do deepfakes of.
It's because he has a perfectly symmetrical face.
He has a symmetrical face, and he just has that personality that if you can get the Tom Cruise excitement down,
Yeah.
and if you're short enough, then
and
you can run the right way, it
No one
works.
can run like that, man.
But I was like, that's 100% him making his thoughts known on the deep fake thing. But the only other thing I wanted to add is that Cruise recently was on a red carpet doing an interview involved with this, and somebody asked him if he was going to see which he was going to see first, Barbie or Oppenheimer, and he was like, I'm doing a double feature that Friday night. He was like, I'm going to go to one theater, and he was like describing to them. He's like, I got it all planned out. I usually like to go to the movies all day. I start in the morning and I go all day. And he's like, but for this, it's going to be a really crazy Friday because I think I'm going to go to Oppenheimer first, and then I'm going to follow it up with Barbie. But I want to go to different theaters. So he's like breaking it down for the person, and ticket sales for both movies have skyrocketed since then.
Oh shit!
So their news outlets are actually saying that they're pretty sure that Tom Cruise has had a
The
strongly
Cruise bump.
positive impact, which is like that man, like he's just pulling the strings of Hollywood. Like
I love that he goes to the movies because I feel like a lot of people from the realm or whatever are like, yeah, I don't really have time to watch movies.
Well, to them,
But
it's a
he
business.
must,
Like you can tell
because he knows fucking audiences.
Well, I'm sure
Yeah.
for him too, it's a business. Like he produced, like when this Mission Impossible opens, it's Tom Cruise presents a Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some of that just comes down to the fact that he's also studious when it comes to film, like making and like being part of writers' rooms and like knowing what gets an audience, like a general audience, excited.
Yeah,
and I think that you don't get that by not watching every big film that you can.
Yeah, and he said in an interview within the past couple days that he does not care about the Oscars or awards shows. He was like, I'm just making movies for,
one, to fucking get us high.
Yeah.
And two, for us to be like, oh
yeah, he's like, I
shit.
just want to make fun movies for a general audience. And I love that. I'm like,
They had been marketing these as like the final Mission Impossible movies, like this was supposed to be the end, but I read recently that the director and Cruise were like, yeah, we're open to more. And I'm like, wrap it up. Like,
I was also telling our friend Nick before I met up with you guys that he and Macquarie have been talking about side projects they want to do together, and one of their ideas was bringing back the Les Grossman character from Tropic Thunder and doing some sort of spin-off with him.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I watched Tropic Thunder like the day before not even thinking about Tom Cruise being in both, and so it was just hilarious watching him with those giant fucking
Meat
hands
palms.
and just dancing to the shot. Got low, 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 low. But yeah, anyway, that's been Internet Daddy's Digest. Probably the only time I'll ever do that, but I had a lot of exciting movies to talk about.
Yeah.
Thanks, loved it. That being said, we'll go ahead and get started with trivia.
That Christmas house of wax, the fog, piranha. It's one of those, right? Right?
We are continuing playing movies trivia game, and it consists of 4 categories. We'll read a category and then go in a circle, reading to each other with me to John, John to Anthony, and Anthony back to me in typical fashion.
But more importantly, John, hit us with that trivia song for this week.
Oh God, I don't know.
Triv.
I was. You
Were we
just,
on the same?
You snatched it straight out of my brain.
Ripped it right out of your brain.
Toto. All right.
Toto recall. That's when you remember the words to Africa.
First category, John, comedy animation. What? Mike Myers played
What?
Austin Powers. Who played his nemesis, Dr. Evil?
Also, Mike Myers.
That is correct.
I am Mike Myers, your nemesis.
Anthony, what film nominated for the 2016 Oscar for Best Animated Feature was devoid of dialogue?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was trying to think of a joke in my head.
Well, what's the joke?
Oh, I was just like, I was going to say something about Primer and potential spoilers, so that's why I didn't make the joke.
Smart. What film nominated for the 2016 Oscar for Best Animated Feature was devoid of dialogue?
2016?
2016.
No dialogue?
Nominated for best what?
Best Animated Feature.
2016 with no dialogue.
I don't think I would have gotten this. It's gettable, but I don't think I would have gotten it.
Because my first thought was Wall-E, but Wall-E has dialogue.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Um,
Just nominated.
fuck. I feel like this should be really obvious to me because I feel like
It's something that's fully in your wheelhouse.
fuck.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. What?
What? Like, oh my god.
I have no clue, so I'm just gonna say Song of the South.
Oh god. It's
The letters are right.
yeah, it's Shaun the Sheep.
Or as I like to call it, Shaun of the Sheep.
Yeah, see, I've never seen the movie, and I had no idea there was no dialogue. So,
Isn't that like a by
Wallace
the
and
Wallace and
Gromit?
Gromit people?
Yep. It is a stop motion, which is why I said it was in your wheelhouse.
I used to watch those Wallace and Gromit movies when I was a kid. They also did Chicken Run, right? Yep. Which is getting a sequel, but
Is it?
Yeah.
I remember that. It was like, tuck your head between your legs
And kiss your bum goodbye.
Yeah.
That's all I remember.
That classic, like, dry British humor.
Yeah, Wallace and Gromit used to always creep me out.
Why?
The mouth.
Like the character designs and the stop motion, like it just used to creep
Didn't
me
they
out.
make a werewolf one too?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Yep.
Tone. What superhero does Will Arnett? Sorry, what superhero does illusionist Will Arnett voice in the Lego movies?
Oh shit! And what's his song as a magician?
The final countdown.
That is a Lego Batman.
It just says Batman, but yes, he is the Lego Batman.
First try.
He has a show. I think I told you about it. I don't know if you ever seen it, but it's the show based on his podcast. the Smartless, and so it's like them going on tour, so it's behind the scenes, and it shows them a little bit on stage, but it's so fucking funny, and they talk shit about him like being the voice of Reese's. It's pretty good. You guys should watch it.
Yeah, I was listening to some other podcast, and that was the one I was telling you about, where the guys were like, yeah, I had no interest in listening to Smartless, but after watching the show, they were like, yeah, I really want to listen to him, because they loved how they like talk shit to each other.
Constantly.
And, like,
Constantly. It's great. Cool. All right, great. So John's on the board. I'm on the board. Anthony, he'll get on the board, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we're moving into action adventure. Jig, who plays Lex Luthor to Christopher Reeve's Superman?
That would be the old Gene Hackman.
Hackman. Yes, that is correct.
I'm hacking the mainframe, man.
Enhance.
And the British pop singer Lamal performed the theme song to what 80s film?
You said pop singer?
Yeah, pop singer Lamal. Limahl. Lamal. Can you use it in a sentence?
You just did. Which pop singer?
Yeah. I think you're making these questions up. I
I'm
don't
sure.
think these are real things that exist.
I sure am not.
I'm going to say Footloose.
It is The Never Ending Story.
Oh.
Okay. Great song. Didn't know that's who did it. 'Cause I
All
don't know
stuff
who
you've
that
heard
is.
of.
Yeah. Just like really weird details about things that I've never
Yeah.
heard of, or that I have heard of.
I don't think any of us would have got either of those.
Nope. No say.
Tone, who plays the president in Air Force One? And your options are
Wait, which one is that?
Air Force One is a plane.
the one about the airplane, yeah.
Harrison Ford.
Yep, you nailed it. Your options were Martin Sheen, Sidney Poitier, or Harrison Ford, and it is Harrison Ford. Get off my plane!
The older he gets, the more I like him.
Yeah.
All right,
Did you see
cool.
that interview recently where the interviewer was like, I just got to say that I still think you're super hot. And he takes like a long a pause where he just like seems like he's really like flustered and uncomfortable. And then he just kind of adjusts his clothes and he just goes, well, I was just blessed with this beautiful, perfect body.
That's too good. I have not seen that. That sounds hilarious, though. John, you're sitting at 2. I'm at 2. And Anthony is still sitting at the goose egg. And we're moving into drama musical. John, what Martin Scorsese thriller cast Leonardo DiCaprio as 1950s federal marshal Teddy Daniels?
Old Teddy Daniels. That is Shutter Island.
That is correct.
I saw when I was looking for Chop Talk today, I saw a headline that was said something about a Goodfellas remake, and my stomach fell into my balls. I was like, no.
What would be the point?
But it turned out that, much like most news these days, it was a clickbaity headline pulled from a quote. They asked some actor, some guy from Vampire Diaries who's now playing Captain Kirk in one of the new Star Trek shows. They asked him like what his dream role was, and he was like, well, I hope they never remake Goodfellas, but if they ever were going to, I would like to be in it in some capacity, but only if Martin Scorsese was remaking it. So it will never happen because he will never remake Goodfellas. And then they spun that into a headline that was like, in a remake of Goodfellas, this guy wants to be in it.
Fucking
Like,
stupid.
So dumb.
Can you not try to ruin my day like that?
Yeah.
With fake news? Fake news.
Anthony, what musical stars Cher and Christina Aguilera?
Moulin Rouge?
It's Burlesque.
Burlesque?
You're on the right.
Yeah, you're in the right zone.
You're in the right clothing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
I gotta say, based on the last couple weeks, I don't like this game very much. We should,
you want to go back?
yeah, we should go back. We're bringing all of our old things back, so let's go back to the old trivia that I was decent at. Tone,
You
true
had
or
a streak in this. You just had a bad couple weeks.
yeah, but if it was more than a week ago, I don't remember it, so it doesn't count.
You literally won twice in 1 week. Allegedly.
Hey, if you have great memories of it, that's awesome. Tone, true or false? The ruby slippers in The Wizard of Oz were originally silver, but changed to show off the Technicolor.
True.
That is indeed true.
Truthfulin.
All right. John and I are at 3. Anthony,
We don't gotta talk about it.
has
Anthony will be
not
on the board in a few moments.
any of it. John, horror sci-fi. John, who starred in Hitchcock's Rear Window, Vertigo, Rope, and The Man Who Knew Too Much?
Oh. Is it Jimmy Stewart?
Oh, that's my name. Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life.
That is correct for a card sweep, sir. Good job so far.
All right. Anthony, the Conjuring movie franchise is based on the stories of what pair of these nuts of
what hack
paranormal
I was about to say, what pair of hack frauds?
paranormal nuts investigators.
Yeah, if you want to hear all about these folks, the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine to be specific,
That is a correct answer.
go check out one of our Nonfiction November episodes where we talked all about them.
Sweet. And you're on the board.
And you're on the board.
For your horror sci-fi question, Tone, in what movie does Woody Allen awaken 200 years in the future?
Oh, fuck. Woody Allen?
I can see.
I talked to my analyst, and he
It's-
said that I shouldn't really be sleeping this long.
Sleeper 19... Oh, fuck. 72?
Well, the answer is just sleeper, so
Oh.
you got it.
Oh,
You're good.
okay. I thought there's a Manchester Orchestra song.
Oh, is it based on that movie?
I don't
Is that
know.
what it's
In my
named
head
after?
it is.
Oh.
Because it's Sleeper, and then I think it's the year.
Oh, I did not know that. I may have to check the movie out just so that maybe that's.
I think he's like a robot or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll check
I can
it out.
see- I can
did
see the-
not know that was a Woody Allen thing
cover.
where he slept for 200 years. But okay.
All right. John and I are tied at 4, and Anthony's on the board, and we're going back to the top with comedy animation. John, in what movie does Dustin Hoffman play a man playing a woman?
That's Tootsie.
That is correct,
Yeah.
sir. Let me see that Tootsie Roll.
Tootsie Roll. Anthony, who voices Mr. Fox in Wes Anderson's animated feature, Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Well,
Are you cussing kidding me?
doesn't get me. That's gonna be George Clooney.
It is indeed George Clooney.
Nice.
He pulled out the back credit card.
So I was listening to the Robert Rodriguez Quentin Tarantino commentary for From Dusk Till Dawn, which I highly recommend to anybody who hasn't listened to it. It's awesome and just hilarious. Tarantino is just like going a million miles an hour yapping about everything, and Rodriguez's response most of the time is just like, yeah, yeah, but they recorded the commentary like right when that movie came out. So in the commentary, they're talking about like, yeah, I mean, George Clooney's going to go on to do great things. I mean, he was just cast as Batman. Like when we discovered him, like how crazy is that? Like he's going to be a superstar, which they were right about the superstar part, but they're like going like, oh, can you believe he's Batman now? Like that's crazy. It's like,
ER was more the reason why he blew up, but yeah.
well, yeah, and part of the reason why they cast him in that movie was ER, because they were like, because I guess in ER, his character would regularly just like flip out at like patients' families, and at one point like somebody was doing some shitty thing and he like walks out into the hospital hallway and like decks a guy, and they were like, we need somebody with that energy for our movie. Tone, Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei co-star in what comedy about New Yorkers in rural Alabama?
Come on, baby.
When you're in trouble, gotta give them a call.
I don't know what that means. Is it My Cousin Vinny?
It
is indeed My Cousin Vinny.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
It's
a good
great.
one.
It's great. I only saw it recently, and I was like, didn't realize that Ralph Macchio was in this movie. Little Ralph Macchio.
That's what I was thinking. So when you said Pesci, I was like,
Pesci's hilarious. Tomei is hilarious and also gorgeous.
Yeah.
all right, so that's 5, 5, and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And next up, action adventure. John, what Roger Moore TV role was reprised in 1997 with Val Kilmer in the title role? Roger Moore played in the TV. Val Kilmer
And Val Kilmer played the movie version
in 97.
in 97.
It's a dope by a road.
What was
94.
What was Val Kilmer doing in 97?
Yeah,
What was I doing in 97? Who did I hit?
Yeah, I think this is the part where I fail. I don't know a lot of Val Kilmer's film history outside of like Top Gun.
Flames to dust, lovers to friends.
Is it asking for the role or is it asking for the movie?
It's the name of the movie.
Name of the movie?
Why do
I'm going to go back to this well, considering I've never seen it, don't know what it's about, and got this wrong last week. Gattaca?
Batman.
The Saint.
Never heard of her.
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I like Roger Moore, though.
Not a big fan of Roger Moore. Specifically, his turn as James Bond.
Oh. Some people say he's the best James Bond.
I wholeheartedly disagree. He is the worst James Bond by a long shot.
No, what did he just in that we watched?
Ooh, he wasn't something we just watched.
Spice World.
So you mean something you watched and he
played
grudgingly sat in the room during?
Yeah, I mean, he nailed
Yes.
it. 100%.
No, I told them already. No, Timothy Dalton is the one that people like the best, huh?
Most people think
people
Sean
say Connery is the best.
Really?
Connery and
Brosnan?
Craig. Well, I would say Craig and then Brosnan.
Yeah,
but
I can't speak to it because I have only seen.
I don't like Roger Moore. I like Timothy Dalton.
Yeah,
Old T-Dalt.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about how I think one of my next big, when we have a little bit more free time post-show, my next big adventure is going to be trying to get through all 25, 26 Bond movies or whatever there are.
Yep. Anthony, who directed the 1990 version of La Femme Nikita, starring Anne Perrault?
Luc Besson.
It is Luc Besson.
Nice, dude.
Took a wild guess.
Hey, you nailed it.
I just felt like I had seen those names together at some
Yeah.
point, probably when we were talking about Fifth Element. Tone. The movie Stardust is based on a novel by which author?
Sick. Neil Gaiman.
It is indeed Neil Gaiman. Oh, sorry, it's Neil Straitman.
Woo!
Neil Byman.
All right, John's got 5. You've got 3, Anthony, and I've got A Gentleman's 6.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And we're moving into drama musical. John, in what movie do Annette Bening and Julianne Moore play a lesbian couple? I love this movie.
Yeah.
I'm
I haven't
also
seen it in a while,
big
but
Julianne Moore fan.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And this movie did not change that. Added to it.
When she's getting her,
When she's acting. I think we should leave it at that.
I don't know what this is.
You want to take a guess, or are you just gonna pass?
I don't have a funny guess here either. Armageddon.
It's The Kids Are All Right.
Julianne Moore gets Hulk smashed.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yep.
Anthony, what Western starring Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, and Gene Hackman won the Best Picture Oscar?
Unforgiven.
And it is indeed Unforgiven.
Nice.
Dope ass movie. The lesson of that movie is drinking's good. No, it is a really, really good movie. Just check it out. Tone. True or false? The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, won the Oscar for Best Picture in 2004.
Oh. True?
It is true. It is true.
All right.
They couldn't decide which of the 6 endings were their favorite at the show, though. I remember that was like the big complaint that everybody had when Return of the King came out, was that it had like 6. Like, it seemed like it was ending, and then it kept having 6 endings. But that's also how just The Lord of the Rings was. I remember spending so much time on like the appendices at the end.
All right. So, John, you still got 4?
5.
5. Anthony, you got 4, and I'm sitting at 7. And we're moving into that horror sci-fi. John, what was Hannibal Lecter's profession before he got caught?
Before he got caught?
I'm an inventor.
Is he a doctor? Are you looking for specifics?
What kind of doctor?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't even say doctor.
I mean, he is Dr. Hannibal Lecter, but is he like a professor?
Nope. He's a forensic psychiatrist.
So, I mean, that's Still a doctor.
Yeah, I would have just said psychiatrist, but yeah. He's a forensic psychiatrist.
Well, you were specific with doctor.
Yeah.
To me, when someone just says doctor, I think doctor.
Also, I mean, more importantly, he eats people.
Yeah.
Less importantly.
Anthony Linda Blair is best known for what role?
What role? Like you mad about it?
The Exorcist.
Name of the character.
Oh, what role?
Yeah.
Reagan McNeil.
Yep. Reagan is all they wanted, but yeah.
Well, guess what? I get double points for that. Triple points. I'm at 8 now.
I mean, those are
Tone, in a weird, totally expected twist of events, true or false, The Exorcist is an adaptation of a Stephen King novel.
That is false.
And then there are parentheses.
William Blatty.
Oh, there's a second name in there.
You missed a middle one.
I don't know, freaking?
William Friedkin Blatty, yeah. No, it's William Peter Blatty, but you got
Peter.
it. You nailed it.
I
Who
swear.
also
You did.
wrote and directed The Exorcist 3.
Which we'll be watching here in a few weeks.
Legion.
I have the book too.
The book.
So, once again, I didn't do quite as well as I would have liked to, but what, did I get 4 points? 5 points?
5.
5?
I think you guys ended up tying.
Yep.
Admirable.
Not bad.
Good job, John.
And you got some tough questions.
Yeah, that's weird ones.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for trivia. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back to talk about Dune and Primer.
Stay tuned for next week where we play a trivia game I'm better at.
Same one.
It'll just be all questions about me.
Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/Porcelain Peak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more. Join the Creep Cult. $5 a month at patreon.com/Porcelain Peak for exclusive content, merch discounts, and more.
Hey, you want to see something really scary?
Welcome back. We are getting down to brass tacks and doing our final redemption episode based off of our shameful misses. You might be wondering, Tone, where's yours? I snuck them in.
We
throughout
covered them
the
bitches
season.
already.
Yeah. So I don't have any left. So we are talking about Dune and Primer. Primer was John's pick. So do you want to break it down for us?
Break it down.
Yeah, so it was directed by, written by, starring Shane.
Edited by, music by.
Yeah, Shane Carruth, who is known shitball, but who's made 2 what I would say are pretty fantastic weird films in like the sci-fi-ish territory that we'll as of today have now covered both of. You can probably go somewhere back into the ether to check out our thoughts on Upstream Color during one of our Uncut Gems conversations. But essentially, it is a very, very short film. I think like 77
minutes.
And that's including a very interesting looking set of credits. They're all like done in like a gray background. I was like, this is kind of cool. I'm all right with this. But essentially, 4 people have a garage that they work out of, like in their spare time, like creating inventions, and they work on like this like carousel of time where like one person like has the garage and the other people are their assistants during that time to come up with things that they can do to try to find like their get rich.
They want to be
thing.
the next like Steve Jobs and Wozniak or Gates and whoever, whatever. They want to have discovered the next big thing, and they accidentally.
By Gates, you mean Phoebe?
Yeah, and they accidentally stumble into time travel.
Yeah,
Kind of.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We'll get into all the nitty gritty details here in a moment. But Shane Carruth plays Aaron, David Sullivan plays Abe, Casey Gooden plays Robert, Anand Upadhyaya it plays Philip, Carrie Crawford plays Kara, and then the rest of them are not in it nearly as much. But I would say that almost everyone who is in it also has some form of job on set as well, whether it's being the cinematographer, doing script writing, being like a PA. Like they all do some sort of work when they're not on camera, which is kind of like the type of filmmaking that Shane Carruth does, or at least did to an extent, where basically everybody gets together, they do like some guerrilla filmmaking, and then they make some magic happen out of it. So I think that there's not a lot else we can talk about aside from like whether or not we recommend it without jumping into spoilers. I would say like aside from saying that they stumble upon time travel in like a very weird and like you have to think about it a lot, and like there's a ton of like weird like
people. There are charts and diagrams online and whole. I was gonna say you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Lots of Reddit threads about deconstructing how the time travel mechanics actually work. But yeah, I would say going forward, spoilers. My little piece on Shane Carruth in these movies. I was obsessed with Shane Carruth for many years. Before Upstream Color came out, just because I had heard about him through pretty much the guys that I still listen to, and their main guy Eric was always a huge Shane Carruth fan, and so I'd heard like you gotta watch Primer. So I checked it out, loved it, and so I was like, I had like a Google alert for Upstream Color, and that movie felt like it took fucking forever to come out. And then when it came out, I was absolutely obsessed with everything about it, and that was part of why that obsession had died down eventually. But that's why I wanted to bring it to the show for an uncut gem with Upstream Color, and then I was happy.
Wasn't he randomly in Swiss Army Man?
Yeah, so he shows up in Swiss Army Man. He was in a movie in 2018 called The Dead Center that he helped produce, but didn't write or direct or any of that stuff. But he had what seemed like a massive burgeoning career in Hollywood. There are some very infamous scripts that you can now just go online and read, because he eventually just released all of the assets and everything from his unreleased movies. One is called A Topiary, and he has all kinds of really cool concept videos and stuff, and it had these big stop motion like weird sculpture creatures that walked around. And then another one was a huge international epic with people like Daniel Radcliffe and Tom Holland and like a million big names attached to it, called The Modern Ocean. And he just was his personality and his way of filmmaking did not mesh with the Hollywood system at all. Mm-hmm. And it got to a point where it kind of seems to have driven him completely insane.
It broke him.
And broke his brain, because now he had a collaboration with Amy Simons and Upstream Color, and then they eventually ended up dating and getting engaged. And then through a series of crazy Twitter rants and things, we found out that he had been in some trouble, and she had filed a restraining order, and I guess he has had some issues with abuse and some run-ins with the police recently. So I can't speak to Shane Carruth being a great person, but I do think that at least the two movies that he made are pretty fucking impressive. Especially, like, I can see in this one why he would have trouble being a part of the Hollywood system, because he wants a ridiculous amount of creative control over the things that he's putting out. So that means that's why he's the writer, the director, the editor, makes the music for both of these movies that he put out. And that's just not really how movie making works. So that's also part of it too, is like, yeah, he may not have been great to work with either, I would imagine, just because he didn't seem to treat the process as a collaborative one, but more as I need to make sure I'm controlling every single aspect of this so it comes out exactly the way I'm envisioning it. But for something as complicated as Primer, I can understand why
the more minds involved. I mean, and they kind of speak to it in the actual film itself when they kind of pare down to the two people who like they're like oh, these other two, like, they're not important to this, they wouldn't get it, so let's continue doing our thing on the side. And then we just won't tell them about it, and we'll keep helping them with their other thing. And like they continue to slowly but surely push those people out of their lives while they're doing these other things.
Recommend from you. Do
Yes.
you recommend?
Oh, yes. I think that it's definitely worth watching.
It's kind of worth watching, researching, and then worth watching again.
Yes, and I mean it's a short enough watch.
More times after
you could do that all in an afternoon and have spent less time than it would take to watch like Dune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, spoilers going forward. Will we go into a little bit more detail about this? Do you recommend it? I know you said that.
Yeah, I thought it was fine.
Yeah. Was this your first time watching it, or?
No, I'd seen it before.
I thought so.
I think in Turlock. I think that it's confusing, but because it had to be with the plot, with the budget. I think they only had like $7,000.
Yeah.
Like they made this movie for $7,000, and so I think that was done out of necessity. Whereas something like Upstream Color, I think, was intentionally just all fucking over the place, just to be like how this is.
Yeah.
But like on purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so going into just more detail on the plot. So the way that the characters talk in this, there is really no expository dialogue that kind of dumbs down what they're talking about, and that was very intentional from Carruth's point of view, because he wanted it to feel like these were real guys who actually would exist in a garage somewhere, who knew all this shit, and this is how they would talk to each other. And so he just did a ton of research into like astrophysics and how a time travel theory could potentially work, and based his time travel theory on a bunch of models that he had read about. And so just, wanted to make all of the dialogue basically incomprehensible to somebody who doesn't have a degree in the fields that these guys have degrees in. Mm-hmm. And so that is the first hurdle you have to get over. And then the second hurdle is just how incredibly low budget the movie is. If you have a problem with a movie that is kind of pieced together with just like, this is one of those situations where they were like we talked about with Saw, where like we didn't even have enough footage to make it to 77 minutes. So they had to like splice in things and add things to even try to get it to like even remotely close to a feature-length movie. Just because of the budget they were working on and the guerrilla style filmmaking, like the U-Haul center that they film in, like all the stuff shot outside of it. They shot that like without permission, and then went and asked U-Haul, and U-Haul was like, yeah, sure, you can come in and actually like use the storage facilities and stuff.
Oh,
and so
cool.
They did that at a U-Haul facility. All of the catering was done by Carruth's parents. They would just cook meals for everybody working on the movie.
Oh, wow.
A bunch of it is filmed in Carruth's like childhood home. So it was really just him using, like you said, his friends and family and people that he had access to, and the tiny bit of money that he was able to. And in his commentary for it, he just talks about how so much of the movie was, how the fuck do we pull this off in the cheapest way possible and still have it be convincing. And a lot of that is, okay, if we're going to do a special effect, let's have the special effect shown on a little like DV camera display. So what he would do is actually film the blank like plate of wherever the effect was supposed to happen, and then take that footage, like he would film it with a regular camera, take that footage, convert it onto like a VHS or a DV camera or whatever, and then with that tiny low quality grainy footage, he was able to then put the effects in super simply with early After Effects type stuff. And because it was so grainy and you're seeing it through that angle, it is convincing because it's cheap. Like, it looks cheap, and it is cheap, and that's how they pulled it off. A lot of shots are just like, we put the camera in a corner and got like 3 mirrors together so he could catch a certain angle, and it's all just like really cool. Like I said, it reminded me of listening to James Wan talk about making Saw, or listening to Sam Raimi talk about making Evil Dead. We were just like, it was a bunch of friends together, and we were flying by the seat of our pants and trying to make it into a movie.
So why don't you walk us through your first experience with this?
What do you think it was about? What are the themes?
It's tough to parse some of that. I mean, I think that obviously there's a lot to talk about around the
what's in the box,
like paradoxes, because I mean that's where the problems start to arise during the film.
It's true though.
But like as they start like figuring out what they have, and then figure out like that you can get into this and it's safe, and you have to like worry about like having things on like a specific time schedule and making sure that like you don't run into you, otherwise you would create a paradox, and like figuring out like where those boundaries get pushed, and then running into what happens when the paradoxes start happening. It's kind of like pushing things too far past where they're supposed to go, and past where they actually personally understand them. So it's like
you're messing with the natural order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that at the end of the day, I think some of the questions that it asks are like, who's truly the one who goes back first? Because they make it seem like it's one way, and then they make it seem like it's another way, and then they keep going back and forth as to like who has the upper hand between these two men, like who really understands what's happening here, and who has like good intentions. And like they slowly start to diverge through the film, and like it gets to the point where there's a ton of infighting, and they're just like constantly arguing with each other, and then doing things behind each other's backs, and it's like one person does something and the other person's like, oh well, you did this, so I'm going to do this. as a way to one up that conversation, or as a way to push further past you, and then eventually till like their friendship and their understanding of what's happening falls apart. And it seems as if Shane Carruth's character goes off to potentially, to recreate at a much larger scale in a different country. Whereas
scary stuff.
Whereas I don't remember his name. The other character, he is
Abe.
Yeah, Abe is going to stay behind and try to pick up the pieces and fix everything that went wrong and prevent them of that current timeline from ever finding the secret.
Yeah. So
from my understanding, how it works is you can only travel back to the point where you turn the box on.
Yeah.
So if you turn the box on at 9 a.m.,
yeah,
and however long you wait, so say you wait until noon, then you can go in the box and travel back those 3 hours. But that's it. So then you go for your time, and at that time, at that 9, your second self is coming out at 9, but you're still living out your day.
Yeah. Which is why they have to go put themselves in a hotel room somewhere so they don't cross paths with their double that's been spit out.
And so then you get back in the box, and that's when you're traveling back, and then you kind of like converge.
But then one of them had a box that had been running the entire time.
So that they try to go back to the very beginning of all the experiments and stop them, the fail-safe box. But like based on what I saw in the diagram and stuff, that's how it works. It's like they set the box, and then they leave, and about 15 minutes later, their double, who is the original having time traveled, comes out, and then the person who's turned on the box then has to go hide somewhere, and that's when they like read stock numbers and start preparing and everything. And so that 6 hours or however long it is, both versions are existing at the same time until the first version who turned on the box then goes into the box. They wait, the 6 hours or whatever, and get popped out back, like you said, at 9 a.m.
So now they're on the same length.
Yeah.
But then during that time, the second version is doing other stuff. So they're kind of rewriting what happened that day.
Yeah, so then at the end, the double that gets popped out, whatever they do to change the timeline ends up being the only sole existing timeline, and the original gets erased. And that original, basically, their only fate was to have gotten in the box and looped around. So, eventually they end up with one timeline that's been changed for both versions, and one version gets erased. So,
on top of that, it gets to the point where their understanding of whether or not it's just them and the doubles in that specific timeline starts to blur some. And they feel like there's
you get that reveal that it's Carruth's character that has the earpiece, right?
Yeah.
And we find out that he's been being fed all of his lines that he's saying in conversation with Abe, like through an earpiece, because he's already been prepared for this entire situation and already done the traveling to like know what's going to happen. That's when it starts getting really twisty and turny about who the fuck's doing what and who's who. And then on top of that, they are having physical side effects from the time travel.
Ear bleeding.
The ear bleeding, and then the stuff that I found super interesting was when they start...
handwriting.
Yeah, they can no longer write properly. It's like writing with your non-dominant hand. And they mention, like, this isn't, fun, like I get in a box and suddenly I'm in a different time. Like, they're adding several hours to their day where it's like now I'm living basically, like, 40-hour days, but because I'm time traveling, like I'm still only living technically like the 24 hours, but I'm adding all this time that's getting erased through the time travel process. So they're exhausting themselves the more that they do this, and it's ruining their health. But it's all about this obsession, and how that obsession is handled differently by the different personality types, because really they're basically the same person, Abe and Aaron, in terms of like, wanting to make this big discovery and everything. But Abe is a much more cautious person, and he's much more like cautious and trying to kind of plan out what they do. And
it's also
Aaron,
why he chooses like to play the stocks instead of going the lottery route.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that they each came to those different conclusions about how they could use
they came to the same
rich.
conclusion of let's make money, but they wanted to do it in different ways.
Yeah. which I think speaks to both of those characters in a massive way.
Yeah, and Aaron's whole he's a lot more brash and just wants to do the next thing and find out how far they can push this thing, and then that's reflected in the end with Abe finally going I fucked up, I'm gonna keep trying to go back to the beginning and stop this from happening, and he tells Aaron you need to leave and never come back, and Aaron's cool, and then goes and gets some big warehouse somewhere in another country, and you're oh well, I guess he's gonna keep doing what he's doing and fuck up the whole timeline.
Yeah,
Barry Allen style.
So, did you enjoy it? Were you confused? Did you look anything
Were you
up?
so confused
what was
that it
your
was hard
process?
to enjoy?
So I knew nothing about it going in, other than that there was potentially time travel in there in some way, shape, or form.
In Cruth.
Yeah, land.
And you
yeah.
said, "Don't bring me down."
But I went in. I think based on the explanation that the two of you had given me, as to how twisty and turny and confusing it could get, I went in expecting a lot more confusing than I ended up getting. Obviously, there's probably stuff that I still don't 100% grasp yet, but I think that having some engineering background, even just a computer level, the conversations that they had, there were still parts of it that I picked up, they're talking about ambient temperatures and things like that, and having conversations about trying to keep things at a specific degree, so that way they don't overheat and cause these problems. Some of those things were a little more second nature just based on stupid hobbies that I have, but there were parts where I was okay, so we got the ones out here and they're doing this thing and they're over in the hotel, and we got these ones who are out here doing this thing, but is there there's a third one potentially, because there's also this thing going on with
6.
Yeah, there's so many of them going around at the same time, and all purposefully trying to avoid each other to make sure that they don't cross things up, and then
You can't cross beams.
on top of that, they're also there's little things that are so unpredictable, because they're not, just because things happen one way once doesn't mean that they can control those things. The scene at the basketball court, I thought was super fucking tense, where he's trying to have this conversation, he's trying to follow the script, and then he, in the original time that it happened, he hits his J and then doesn't hit it the second time around, and then he's oh, brick, and then everything diverts from there. And you can, and that's part of they try this over and over and over and over again to try to get it right, so that way they can set it up exactly the way that it was to make sure that the timeline is fixed. And that shit was super intense. Like I said, I found it super fascinating. I was doing the typical at the edge of the couch, just staring, trying to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I'm looking around at all the corners, making sure I'm not there's no little hints and stuff tucked into different places.
I think it's a lot to do with their clothes, if I'm not mistaken, what they're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Cruz said that was also part of the intention, was to make it very confusing, because it's confusing for Abe and Aaron. They are getting more and more confused as more and more doubles and elements get introduced, and they don't know how to control this thing. They don't know what they're fucking doing. They're just guessing and hoping that they're gonna be able to figure it out, because they're scientists and engineers or whatever, and they, like we said, messing with the natural order. They're this is beyond us. But he was yeah, I want to put you in their shoes of being just so fucking confused by the end about what's going on, that if you're more
That's why I'm so fucking confused.
Yeah. So that you're Abe, where you're I just want to go back and make none of this happen.
Yeah.
Because it's so confusing.
I want to put everything back in Pandora's box.
Well, and I also do think it's really admirable to try to make a time travel movie that has some sort of internal logic, because most time travel movies don't even fuck with that. They're time travel doesn't make sense. So in Terminator or Back to the Future, there are a million plot holes and you just don't care about them or address them because the movie is good. And in this, I think the movie is good, and also and I'm sure people who know this shit really well could find issues with this time travel setup like any other, but at least there was an attempt made that I think is very admirable to do the research and try to take something that would typically be just a huge dissertation by some theoretical physicist into an entertainment thing, and try to present it to people and say, hey, here's a theory on time travel that you probably haven't seen before, and here's how it could fuck you up if you tried it.
I like the idea too, and I don't know if I've ever seen this where it's just from when you started. Like you can't just go back to any time in the past or any time in the future. It's only when the machine was on.
Yeah,
I think that's a really cool idea.
So then it's a challenge to figure out like, hey, what can we use this for? You know, immediately the first thought is money, but then they start thinking like, okay, well then how can we put boxes within boxes and try to figure out how to go fix actual personal things that have happened in our lives? And then you start to find out that there's more boxes than you thought there were, because they've always been kind of trying to think steps ahead of each other. I also love that the boxes are not some fancy, cool, the time machine chair that they sit in and it's all this stuff. They're just these really shitty taped together boxes that feel like something that would be the prototype of some amazing invention. Like, I'm sure if you looked at the first iPhone prototype, it probably didn't look anywhere near as sexy as the iPhone did. It was a bunch of shit stuck together. But I also, the boxes were so cheap that I think they only had one, and they were able to do some stuff or maybe they had two. They had them on a pickup truck trying to take them back from the U-Haul storage place at the end of shooting, and they just crumbled apart on the road, and so those don't even exist anymore. He was like, if I wanted to keep them, I couldn't have, because everything was so cheap that it just fell apart when we were done.
That's wild.
So,
all right, so I know you enjoyed it. What took you so long to get into this one?
So I didn't know this movie existed until we started doing the show.
Okay.
Easily could have been another uncut gem.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that I wouldn't have thrown, like, I'd seen it in like a lot of like top 10, top 20 sci-fi films of all time. I don't know if I 100% am like, yes, I can place it in that spot as of this exact moment in time, but I do know
What
that
about 6 hours in the past.
Maybe I wouldn't have probably put this as a sci-fi miss until I had seen Upstream Color, because I loved Upstream Color. I thought that movie was twisty and turny in all the right ways. Like I said, it did all of the stupid things that scratched my brain, and I was enthralled by the way that film was put together. I thought it was beautifully shot, beautifully edited, confusing in all of the best possible ways, and did all of the not holding your hand parts that make me really want to try, like, sit down and dig into some shit.
Yeah.
And just to the right amount. There's just enough exposition to get you going, and I think that this does similar things.
I think this is lacking is the beautiful shooting and the beautiful editing. That's like, Upstream Color just takes that to the next level by also looking amazing
and having a little bit more budget.
Yeah.
But I like.
So now, would you say it is a shameful miss? So if there's people out there that are big sci-fi fans and they haven't seen this, would you think like, this is something that you need to add to your repertoire?
100%, yes. I would say tack this on along with Upstream Color. I think that I personally think that Upstream Color is a better film, but that's just because I think it fits more to my sensibilities, and there's more of a philosophical discussion that takes place in Upstream Color that really gets me going. Whereas this is definitely, like I said, this still has light parts of that, like I said, the message
There's
of the
also
natural
more
order.
emotional weight to Upstream Color.
Yes.
Yeah, but no, I totally agree. It's not difficult to get through Shane Carruth's filmography,
because he only got two.
He's got two movies.
Yeah,
so.
and they're
tooth.
and they are both. I would say both excellent films.
Both of them.
Both of them.
All right, great. So, how do you feel now? Would you say you said not top 10, not top 25? How high of a list would you put this on?
Oh, so I mean,
would you say it's better or worse than your favorite sci-fi film, The Fifth Element?
Oh, it's definitely better than The Fifth Element, but I mean, I think it is.
Multipass?
Depends on who you ask, I guess.
Yeah,
because chicken good.
Well, I for one am pretty blown away that
top what
that we were able to watch both of these movies. So thank you.
I mean, I don't think that it's like in a place where I would give it like a ranking yet. Like I need
to revisit it.
I want to revisit it first before I jump in with like a where I would plug this in.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, cool. Well, then we're ready to talk about some Dune.
June.
All right, I know you know a ton about this. Yeah, you're the resident Lynch guy.
And
I was watching it with Erin, and she was like, "Hey, isn't that the dude from Twin Peaks?" And I was like, "Yeah, duh."
There's so many Twin Peaks.
David
people.
Lyncher. He did Twin Peaks.
My other favorite director named David. Yeah. So everybody already knows about Dune. I'm sure everybody already knows that in 1984, David Lynch did a Dune. Everybody probably already knows that most people say it's terrible. But
do you think that the success of Star Wars and Star Wars having been influenced by the book Dune was problematic for this theatrical version of Dune and people comparing the two?
100% yes.
Yeah, because
because there's elements, and if you don't know about this book and know that Lucas pulled from that, then you're going to be like, what the fuck? They just ripped off Star Wars and did it bad.
And on top of that, Lucas was smart enough to take the elements from Dune. Maybe not Lucas entirely, because his original script for the Star Wars is a lot closer to what Dune feels like, where it's just a lot of mumbo jumbo that's way overcomplicated. Not saying that Dune is way overcomplicated, but in his version, like it was a lot of people coming to him and saying, like, if you want this to work, you need to tone it down and you need to make it more make Star Wars more accessible. And a lot of that came through the cast members giving him feedback about, like, I'm not gonna fucking say this, it makes no sense, or his wife at the time who edited the movie, like, really editing it to make it a fun, fast-paced movie. But it's a great combination of, let's take these crazy sci-fi concepts but make them super accessible by making the whole thing based on, like, old adventure serials and, you know, Flash Gordon and stuff like that, and making it a lot more accessible, which this movie is the exact polar opposite of. It's not accessible even remotely. In my review for it, I said I can completely understand why, if you were not a diehard Frank Herbert's Dune fan, you would have zero interest in this movie. And if you weren't a diehard David Lynch fan, which at the time, unless you had seen Eraserhead and The Elephant Man, you probably weren't, then yeah, this wasn't going to work for you on any level. And I happen to be a huge fan of both things, so it worked for me on some level, even though I will say that it is a mess. But I had a blast with it.
Do you feel like it fits in Lynch's filmography? Like, does it feel like a Lynch movie? And what, if so, what ways?
There's a big talking butthole.
So it has a lot of recognizable Lynch elements, but I would say no, it doesn't belong, because Lynch works best, and he's addressed this. He was like, I sold out on Dune. I knew while I was doing it I was selling out. I was just naive and thought it would all work out in the end. When it didn't, I realized I had made a naive, horrible decision, and I never did that again. And he never has. He's just done his own shit on his own terms, outside of the second season of Twin Peaks that he left, and then that turned terrible. But I think Lynch works when he is making a thing that is like 100% his. I know The Elephant Man is based on a real person and all of that, but he really infused like as much of his own, and that's also one of his more straightforward movies. But yeah, I think when Lynch has got that total control over the property and the story, and it's all based on his dreams and his meditation and the things he gets hard about, like, he knocks it out of the park, and there's no one else like him. But when it comes to something like this, like, I just don't think he was the right person for the material, and that's why I think even he agrees that it doesn't really belong in his filmography. And that's why it took me so long to watch, was because I was like, to me, it just doesn't even feel like it should be a David Lynch movie. But I backed off on some of that having seen it, because I do think that a lot of the way that the scenes are staged, a lot of the weird delivery of the dialogue feels Lynchian, and then especially a lot of the like gross out creatures and the whole everything with the Baron feels David Lynch.
Yeah, looks all fucking gross, covered in boils and shit.
And then like the oil scene.
Yeah, and then all of the like the dream stuff, obviously very Lynch. Lots of images on top of images dissolving over each other, which is a thing that he's continued to use all the way through the very last episode of the new Twin Peaks. That's a huge part of it, like that. So there's a lot of hallmarks where you wouldn't mistake this for anybody else's film. But I just don't think the two things mesh in any way that makes it as successful as it could have been if a director like the person they originally approached, Ridley Scott, had done it. Which is a shame, because the reason that Lynch ended up agreeing to do it was because he read the book and absolutely loved it. Yeah. And he also loved the idea of being able to construct his own, like, not his own, but construct a big, expansive world that had all this detail and all of the creativity that would afford him. But unfortunately, he didn't get final cut. Dino De Laurentiis was heavily involved in the creative decisions and changing things. All of the narration, like the whole intro, all of that stuff was added after because people didn't feel like the movie made any sense.
Well, it takes all of that and overexposes it, you know, the expositionary dialogue that takes place in all of these like headcanon narrations that are constantly happening in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they had to hand out glossaries of terminology to people in the movie theater when this movie came out was a lot of people would just get that, stand up, and say, I want a refund. I don't want to see this movie.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think like that again. That totally makes sense. Like it was not a movie that felt accessible to a general audience.
So what he does is takes this book and turns it into a 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah, which
right?
if you turn it sideways, it's not a tiny book.
Right. And what they've been able to do with, I don't know if anyone can see this. It's like what, like 1.5 inches, 2 inches?
Yeah.
Spell it. Anyone that sees the new one, what Denis Villeneuve was able to do
Dennis Villeneuve.
was make a 3-hour movie about half of this fucking thing. And so
Which is just insane to think about. Like, and that's, yeah, it's just insane. And that was the thought with this movie originally. Lynch wanted to make it 2 movies. And the studio said, no, we need to make it 1. He had originally written it as 2 movies. And then he was like, okay, and turned in his first cut, and it was like 4 hours long. And the studio said, you got to get it down to 2. Which is, it's just insane with this story. Like,
there's so much to cover, and where this movie fails, because if you watch the 2, the first half of this is
almost beat for beat exactly the same.
It's the same stuff, it's fucking way
crazy.
faster.
It's just too fast. And so where in the new one, you care about those characters. You have affection for Paul and for Papa Atreides, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even Josh Brolin's character, I don't remember his name, but like you have
Momoa as well.
Yeah, like you're into all of them because you get time with them, and there's so much character building that when shit hits the fan, you're like, what the fuck is going on with these people? And it's really good, and you get to spend time and really learn about them, even with the bad guys. Like the Baron is so much more intimidating when you see what he's doing and how he's able to do it. And I think that although it's the same story, this movie just is rushed, and that's its biggest problem.
And because it's rushed, like you said, John, it then has to make up for it with all of this really weird, overly complex narration. And it does so much of that from the very beginning. Like, it really gets off on the wrong foot, I think. Like, once you get into it and you start to, like, vibe with the world, I was having a blast with it. Mm-hmm. I was like, the budget was huge, and the production is gorgeous. Like, yeah, it doesn't really feel cohesive in a way that obviously Denis' version, like, that whole world feels realized and designed to a T. But still, the fact that these are massive fucking sets. They filmed most of this in Mexico just because no studio that they could find anywhere else had room for the sets they wanted.
Didn't
to
have
build.
the land.
Yeah, and they also could go to, like, you know, actual desert Dune places in Mexico and film there, but that caused a lot of problems with people having health problems and with getting people to help in the production. But it was a massive undertaking, and I think for all of that, it's still impressive what he was able to do. I just think that, like I said, it gets off on the wrong foot because immediately you have this dream princess person pop up, Virginia Madsen, and going, let me explain everything about the Space Guild and the House Harkonnen and the Atreides and all this stuff. And then from there, you go to the fucking Space Guild mutant thing almost immediately, talking to the Emperor, and said, the Emperor Padishah Shaddam the Fourth, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? And the smart thing to do is start with the Atreides family and start with getting you acquainted with that family and having you care about those characters because they're your main characters, they're your main through line, and don't overwhelm people with the shit that doesn't make sense. Let that stuff make sense because you're learning about it through the eyes of Paul or through, you know, and that's how the book really is that Paul is like 15. So that's closer to, I mean, I know Chalamet's older than that, but
he looks a little
Kyle
closer.
MacLachlan definitely looks closer to 25, 30 than he does 15 in this movie. And that
still
makes,
hella young from what I'm used to seeing.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
crazy.
yeah, and this is pre-Twin Peaks. Like, it's crazy to see him that young.
Yeah, he
so
hasn't even had a
fresh-faced.
damn good cup of coffee yet.
Yeah, that's going to change his life for sure. I found myself trapped in a red room, and
Full of spice.
Yeah, and so because he's 15 and he is, you know, being taught about the Bene Gesserit and the Fremen on Arrakis and about Arrakis and all this stuff. When you're reading the book, you're learning about all of these things through Paul.
Learning what the weirding way is and all that sort of shit. And like they just randomly just say, oh, the weirding devices are destroyed, and like they skip over some of those things in effort to try to make you understand this like crazy geopolitical thing that's happening.
Yeah, and I mean, this movie, because it does over-explain everything, I think as a side effect, it might make people who were confused by Denise Part 1 maybe understand it better because they had everything spelled out for them, like literally word for word. Most of the narration and stuff is just lifted dialogue straight from the book, which is cool if you're a fan of the book to go. And Frank Herbert liked that too. He didn't hate the movie. He was just like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't perfect, but I loved that so much of it was what was in my book.
Yeah,
and the main thing he just disagreed with was the ending. But it
feels like a Star Wars movie in a lot of ways, but Star Wars for the most part is pretty simple. It's everything bare bones and stripped down
and fast.
And this is this is fast too, but in plot points.
Well,
and it's just like the extravagant, way too much version of Star Wars.
Well, it's also like everybody hates the sci-fi where everybody is a hoity-toity British person or whatever, just like all talking about the royalties and the bloodlines and the family feuds and all that. And, you've got to find a way to make that snappy and interesting, or you got to find a way to give that some sort of weight or emotion to get people invested. They're not going to gravitate toward characters who are just in a monotone talking about a bunch of shit that you don't understand. You're never going to attach to something like that. And I get if that was like, oh, that's how we're setting up Paul's character so that he can finally break out of that. But like, he never really changes from that kind of one note character throughout the entire movie. And I love Kyle MacLachlan, but I don't think that his performance is anything but pretty one note throughout it. I think some other people give like the guy playing the Baron, I think knocks it out of the park just because he's so fucking over the top and crazy. But
yeah,
we don't really feel the weight of anything in this. Like we don't really feel the weight of the leader of the Atreides dying, Paul's dad.
Well, and the assassination attempt.
Yeah, we don't
like
feel
that.
the weight
Like
of
that scene in Denis' version is so fucking intense,
and in the book too. Yeah.
And then
you care about Leto at that point, so you're freaking out about, and Paul cares about his father. So
yeah.
And you don't feel the weight of him meeting the Fremen and then like rising to power. They're just like, hey, what's up?
And you
I'm gonna
definitely
take over.
feel that in Denis' version. Like when he meets the Fremen, like it's a big deal, and you feel the weight of all that stuff, and like the voice, like the Bene Gesserit like magical voice and stuff.
It's the best part of this one is when that little girl does it. So fucking funny. She's like, I could have you. I was like, oh fuck.
Interestingly enough, so that's Alicia Witt. She went on to show up in Twin Peaks. The original, and in Twin Peaks: The Return, which I didn't realize, and now I want to go back and watch it.
Oh,
but
wow.
She was an actual child prodigy. She was like playing piano at 2 years old and could speak like,
oh shit,
like perfectly well by 4, and so like she pretty much was that character.
That's wild.
You can tell that she's obviously dubbed in the movie, but
yeah, really, my biggest like complaint, I guess, is some of the effects, like the fight scene with Paul and Patrick Stewart, is it?
With the big blocks?
Yeah.
Roblox that shit, or fucking Minecraft.
Well,
yeah, pretty much.
You can tell that behind this, they're
It's a cool
having some
effect.
sort of choreographed fight, but you can't tell that they're doing that because somebody in the creative department, whether it was Lynch or somebody else, decided we're going to put these big
to
blocks
show like
over
the
them.
vibrating.
Yeah, and
right?
it's like if you can't pull off the effect, just remove it.
I think they did. I think that for being 84, like the effects in this are pretty cool. Like they did a really good job with most
They're
of it.
inconsistent. Some of them look amazing for 84, and then others look terrible. It's just like,
that one,
you're just.
I think some of it is the
forth.
difference between doing like practicals with like miniatures and things like that, and those working really well because that'd been so polished by that point, and then the other parts are like attempting to rotoscope over the top of like of like a choreographed fight scene,
right.
and maybe not having gotten the best person to do that. I mean, because even if you go back to what would have been its direct comparison point at that time, Star Wars, if you look at the original Star Wars, the rotoscoping on like the lightsabers and stuff like that was awful.
Yeah, that's why you can't find those versions anymore.
Yeah,
because George Lucas went back and fixed them.
Yeah,
and David Lynch has been offered to go back and do a director's cut or anything, and
Don't blame him.
He has a couple quotes that I actually just remembered that I wanted to read about what he had to say about this.
The weather in LA.
So, did you watch it like this week for the first time, or you had watched it recently for the first time?
No, I watched it yesterday for the first time.
Oh shit. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Oh, right
and-
on. So again, you said you kind of avoided it because you're a big Lynch fan and you
And
kind of
big
wanted
Dune
to taint
fan,
it.
and I didn't want to taint either
Tarnish
thing.
it.
Yeah.
So
And because I had
now-
just heard for years that it was a train wreck, and so I was like, really, guys? Like, this is not...
Yeah.
But again, I can see why at the time it was released, people were not at all vibing with it. I think it's just one of those movies that, in hindsight, especially, again, as a fan of Lynch and a fan of Dune, it's fun.
And do you think that's where the movie succeeds for you? Do you think somebody that's not a Dune fan and not a Lynch fan would still enjoy this? Like if somebody was coming off of something like Star Wars, like, oh, I'm looking for more sci-fi movies,
Space operas.
Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't show this version to Adrienne. I don't think she would enjoy it at all. But I'll show her the Denis version, and then if she's interested in the story of Dune, then I might, for fun, go back and show her this version. But this is in no way the way that I would try to introduce anyone to this story, because like I think that's my biggest issue with it, is that I just don't think it does the material justice in any way. It's cool that he was able to fit the entire story almost into a 2-hour movie, but because it's so rushed and because his style doesn't fit and give the weight and the emotion to the story and make you believe in it, like that's the thing too, is like good sci-fi is the kind where in the beginning you're really confused, and the book has a whole glossary of terms you have to keep referring to and stuff. It's like Lord of the Rings was the same for, but those are the worlds that you get so entrenched in that, but by a quarter of the way through I was like, I know what all these terms mean, and I know who's going behind who's back and who all the characters are and how they're related to each other, and I care about all of that. And you kind of forget that you're saying Sardaukar warriors and Arrakis and the spice melange and all this stuff and the Muad'Dib and the Kwisatz Haderach, and it just it's crazy shit. But if it's executed in the right way, it's pretty amazing and well thought out. But
So you don't think that it should be a sci-fi shameful miss for a general audience?
no, because I have caveats. Like I really don't think that if I didn't know anything about Lynch and I didn't know anything about Dune, I don't think I would have liked this movie at all. Like
So it was a
there were a
shameful
couple
miss for
moments where
you.
I've been like, that's goofy and that's funny and that's fun, but I probably would have hated this movie like most other people do. But with those caveats, I would say I recommend it if you like those other things, because I think if you're a fan of Dune, it does enough stuff that Denis' version didn't do from the book. That's you're like, oh, that's cool that they included that.
Yeah.
And cool to see the whole story, even though wait a few months and we'll see the rest of the story in better executed.
Was this your first viewing as well, John?
I think I might have attempted to throw it on at one point in time, a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and did not succeed in completing the film, just because I thought it was weird as fuck. It was before I'd watched any Lynch at all, so I didn't
Do you
have
feel like Eraserhead helped?
some, because I was expecting more weird and more gross, and those
It's
things
weird
happen.
that anyone saw the elephant, because that's Elephant Man is what got him this job. It's weird that anyone saw Elephant Man and thought that's the dude who needs to do Dune.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense to me.
The Dune dude.
Yeah, that's
the Dune dude.
David the Dune dude.
But my attachment to Dune is strictly for Denis, because I've never read the book. My only knowledge of the book is osmosis from you, and so
Jones even.
Yeah. But I really like not only Denis' take on Dune, but the music that they used for Dune.
In Denis' version?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is the heart. It is the heartbeat of that film, and like I said, it's a masterclass. But
Besides a weird few like 80s rock moments in this, I think the music is pretty good overall.
yeah, it's not bad. I mean, it's not
Dodo.
It doesn't stack up, but it's for this take and this adaptation, it fits well. But because I don't have like a massive attachment to Lynch, and I don't have a massive attachment to Dune as a property, like this is a pretty middling movie for me. Like I don't think that it's like dog shit, and I see all of the value in the hard work that was put into it. I just, like I said, the stuff that the studio did to try to make it palatable for a general audience just doesn't work for me, because I love that in Denis' version my hands are free to do what they want and are not being held by anyone, and I have to fucking fill in the gaps. I have to use my more smarter brains to make it work. And when you try to, it's the same thing that happened with Blade Runner. When you try to force a narration in order to try to fill in the gaps to make it palatable, then you're just making it like homogenous and the same as everything else, and you take all of the things away that make the shit special. And that's what I think happened here. There's a lot of stuff that could have made this special, but because the studios interfered, it's not special.
Yeah, and I've heard people who saw Denis' version, like I've heard reviewers and people on podcasts say that they like Lynch's version more because, in their opinion, Denis' version doesn't have any of the color. It's very sand colored and gray, and a lot of people enjoy the goofier elements because they're like, at least in Lynch's version, there's fun stuff happening. Like there's goofy, colorful, fun stuff happening. I don't necessarily think that that's stuff that's in the book, you know,
that
like that.
It's a better movie. It's just a different take.
Yeah, it's everybody's got their tastes.
I think
strokes.
If I wanted that, then I would go for something like
Tremors
or like
The Fifth Element
or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like those are the kind of things where I expect there to be like goofy comedic elements in some way, shape, or form, and Dune is just not where I expect that.
Just hard sci-fi, bro.
Yeah.
Well, Lynch said in 2006, quote, "Dune, I didn't have final cut on it." No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do his voice for the whole thing. Dune, I didn't have final cut on it. It's the only film I've made where I didn't have final cut. He says, I technically didn't have final cut on Elephant Man, but Mel Brooks gave it to me. And on Dune the film, I started selling out even in the script phase, knowing I didn't have final cut. And I sold out. So it was a slow dying the death and a terrible, terrible experience. I don't know how it happened. I trusted that it would work out, but it was very naive and the wrong move. In those days, the maximum length they figured I could have is 2 hours and 17 minutes, and that's exactly what the film is. So they wouldn't lose a screening a day. So once again, it's money talking and not for the film at all. And so it was like compacted and it hurt. It hurt a lot. There is no other version. There's more footage, but even that is putrefied.
Wow.
So he was like, even if they offered the idea of him doing a director's cut, he wouldn't want to look at it. But as of an interview last year, he actually has come around on the idea of just even looking at the footage. He was like, I would be interested to go back and kind of take a trip down memory lane and see if any of that footage is worth even looking at. But he never had a director's cut. Like, he had his long cut, but he was like, this is the movie that exists. This is the only version that's ever going to exist. But if people are interested in learning more about the long, crazy road that Dune took to get to the screen in the first place in 1984, check out the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune. That was one of the first big, huge, expensive attempts that fell through. And that had people like Pink Floyd doing the music. It had like artists like Mobius doing concept art. It was going to be this crazy, colorful, trippy, wild thing. Lynch's, outside of being colorful and kind of trippy, doesn't have much in common with Jodorowsky's, but his was supposed to be like 4 hours long and this huge, no, I think it was going to be like 13-hour long, like epic or something. And so obviously that whole thing just ran out of money and caved. But what came out of that, because Dan O'Bannon was working on Jodorowsky's Dune, was a lot of the same designers, including Giger, moved on to do Alien after that, including Ridley Scott. He was originally attached to do Dune. The process was taking way too long to get the thing off the ground. Ended up going and doing Alien, which was probably a better move for his career. Definitely a better move for his career overall. I would have been interested to see what he did with Dune, but he also ended up doing Blade Runner. Weird little connection here is he left Dune to do Blade Runner. Denis Villeneuve did the sequel to Blade Runner. Denis Villeneuve also did
that is cool.
the new Dune. So there's all in the family.
I'm gonna fuck you up, Scott. I'm coming for Alien, bitch.
Yep.
He could do a real good.
And honestly, in
No.
both cases,
I think he could.
I don't think he could, because Denis is character pieces and Alien's monster, like horror.
I think
when they try to do a character piece, people don't like it.
Yeah.
That's what Prometheus is more about.
Yeah, but
Philosophy. And
I
people.
dug Prometheus.
I like Prometheus too.
I like Prometheus a lot.
Yeah, well, that's a
Way better than
completely different set of discussion. That we
two
already had.
There's a
last
retrospective.
Summer. Yeah.
There's a retrospective.
But yeah, overall, I'll say
I liked it, and I've never read the book, and I've only seen a handful of Lynch stuff. I would say I'm a Lynch fan. I haven't watched his stuff and been like, fuck Lynch. But really, my most experience with him is Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
So,
and we
I
didn't
mean,
even talk about the cast in this movie, but a ton of Twin Peaks
alum
people.
So, yeah, and I still had a good time. I was like, this is kind of a blast. I think maybe
And Brad Dourif.
because I have seen Denise. And I was able to understand what was going on.
Well, that's a good question. If you hadn't seen Denise, do you think you would have enjoyed this at all, having
I think it
zero
would have been-
familiarity with Dune?
I don't think so. I think it would have been harder to follow, even with the narration.
But because you were able to connect the scenes and go, oh,
Yeah,
I've seen the
I
other
know what's
version of
going
this.
on.
Yeah.
I know, yeah, and I even texted you, Anthony, during my viewing of it, and I was like, I kind of don't want to watch the second half of this because I don't want spoilers for what's coming up in Denise because
I was dreading.
don't know the story.
I was dreading my my moment, my TVA moment of like crossing the barrier where I no longer know what's happening.
And it's basically like right at the halfway point of this movie is where they cut, where it then goes into new territory.
Yeah, and I was like,
all I'll say without spoiling anything is that spoiling this version of Dune, at the end of this movie, Paul, through his crazy Quetzalcoatl Haderach powers, he's able to make it rain on Arrakis for the first time in
He's just
ever.
throwing out dollar bills.
yeah,
He makes it rain, which honestly, immediately I was like, that's probably terrible for the sandworms, and it's going to destroy the entire ecosystem of the planet, which will ruin the spice production, which is not what they want right now. But that does not happen in the book, and that was Frank Herbert's main problem, or really like only problem at the time with this movie, was he was like, Paul is not a god, he is a man playing God. So he does not have like the power to make it rain on a planet where it's never rained.
Ever, right?
Yeah, and I know like thousands of years in one of the future books, I know eventually it does rain and it becomes like a lush planet, I think, or something. But
Yeah, because they're still going, dude. They
Yeah.
have a bunch of them, but there's like different series, and there's only like some sequels. There's a lot of weird shit.
But the
with
whole
this
point of
series.
like Paul's story and about Dune is that it's supposed to be you can't trust your leaders no matter who they are, including Paul. So Paul is like, this ends in a very traditional, he was the chosen one, he completed his Messiah journey, and really the story of Dune is more like, this is all like, because the Bene Gesserit, they've been like fucking with the bloodlines and stuff and trying to make this thing, like there's always some hand behind everything, and you can never trust really who is the good guy and who's the bad guy, and I like that more, and that's what Frank Herbert was trying to do. But overall, in my review, I said this movie somehow finds a way to unfold space and time by making a 2-hour movie feel like it was 4 hours long, because it moves super fast. But also, I was saying I watched this with AirPods, and all of the like whispering and the whispery dialogue just lulled me to sleep. Like, a bunch of different times, and I kept having to like rewind.
ASMR.
Yeah. But overall, I still had a blast with it. I'm definitely going to rewatch it at some point. I think probably after I see part 2 of Denise's version, I will probably go back and rewatch this, and with those two parts together and this, see how they compare. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good time. It's just, if you have no familiar with either aspect of it, Lynch or Dune, you're probably not gonna have a good time with it. So those are the caveats there.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up on our final redemption from our shameful misses. Pretty crazy, huh? Yeah. Just another thing we're done with.
Well, guys, we've been redeemed. That means we've been redeemed.
Yeah.
This house is clean.
I feel like we were already kind of pulling at straws there to make those misses happen, because I wasn't super shameful about my last few. But
Yeah.
we're all good. How you feel? You feel dirty? You feel clean?
So there are some fantastic fucking movies we've watched for the first time because of this series, and
Yeah.
I'm
How
so
fun was Brazil?
I love Brazil is one of my favorites that
I've
we've
never
watched.
seen Carrie before we were doing. That was one of my horror
shit.
shameful misses. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that movie is perfect.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's been good. It's been a good segment. I'm glad that we did it, and it's pushed us to watch a lot of movies. And I feel like that shameful thing, especially for me, could be pushed into other genres, because there's some shit you'd be like, you have not seen that?
Well, I mean, a lot of this general movie trivia that we've been doing has put a lot of those movies like in my mental list of I should probably check that out because I've never even heard about it.
Yeah.
Bunch of different.
It's good enough to be on
baseball
trivia.
movies, yeah. But do you want to? We chatted recently, but if you missed it, the idea for the rest of the show is really going to be us wrapping up loose ends and talking about movies that we have always wanted to talk about but never really got a chance to, and now we can all force each other to watch said
Do
movies.
those things.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get a week of 2 movies. John's getting a week of 2 movies. And Anthony's getting a week of 2 movies, and then we're gonna go from there.
Yeah, we will keep it loose.
So I know one of my movies, and then for my second movie, I want you two to pick. So the first
shit.
movie,
Don't make me decide things.
for sure, is going to be John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China.
Which I really want to revisit because I was not a huge fan the one time that I've seen it.
Oh, I think it's.
So-
I think it's.
I think
But I
that
also
we
didn't
should
watch
try to watch it together.
So that's what I was gonna say is that I know you've said that it's way more fun to watch with a group.
I saw it for the first time with my buddy Kyle in theaters. It
Yeah,
was
I
like
mean
a
that was
replaying,
probably
and I was like,
amazing. I watched it alone at home and probably was like half asleep. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
So if we can make it happen, I say we do that. If you can make it happen with friends, I say you do that too. My other 2 choices will be for you guys to decide. I'm torn between Super 8. So I know we've been talking about it, and I didn't get it on my fucking wheel spin. But we also never talked about Rosemary's Baby. And we kind of strayed away from that. But I think we ended up coming to the conclusion like there's a lot of other people involved
I
in
mean,
that
we just
movie.
talked about Shane Carruth and Primer.
Yeah,
So, I
so-
think that, yeah.
So those are my 2 because I feel like Rosemary is a classic. But also Super 8, we've been talking a lot about Spielberg and
people
Spielberg
trying to do
imitators.
Spielberg, yeah.
And that is a straight Spielberg imitation. So
I've only seen Super 8 the once. I'd be really interested in revisiting it.
And I just watched E.T. and texted you about how the entire plot of Super 8 is ripped off of that scene of... oh, no, it's Close Encounters when he's got the train set and he's like, this is how a train derails. Yeah, let's do Super 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like we just decided.
Super 8 it is. So that's what we're going to do. Big Trouble in Little China and Super 8 too.
It's a great pairing.
Yeah, these the movies that we watch, there's gonna be no themes anymore. We're done with the themes. We're just going. These are just gonna be weird pairings of movies that we've always wanted to check out. So.
Yeah, and for our bonus, if you're interested, this week we talked about Tremors.
More
Next week,
sandworms.
Yeah. And then I'm from Saturn. And next week we're talking about Unbreakable. So
Yeah.
check those out. And thank you so much for checking this episode out. We'll see you next time. I've been Tone.
I've been John.
And I cannot fear. Fear is the mind killer. My voice is a killing word, or something like that. Internet Daddy, Muad'Dib, Quintet Satarak.
Thanks again.
Anthony. Bye.
Keep it creepy.
Get out of here.
Keep it something. Keep it on.
What are you still doing here?